You'd think after 70 years, Christmas would have lost some of its sting. But no, family trouble hits you just as hard at 72 as it did at 27. I was sipping my evening bourbon in the living room, the fire flickering against old photo frames of my late wife Linda, when the phone rang sharp and sudden. "Dad, I can't do this anymore." My daughter's voice, brittle as glass, shook me right out of my chair. "Abigail." I could tell from the way she paused, holding back a sob, collecting herself, always more worried about upsetting me than about her own pain. "Abby, sweetheart, slow down. What's going on?" She was locked in the upstairs bathroom of her husband's parents' big house outside of Des Moines. "Ethan yelled at me for burning the cinnamon rolls. I was trying to make his mom's breakfast, but the oven was too hot. He called me useless, Dad. Said I embarrassed him in front of everyone. I can't breathe." I stood up, old knees popping, and stared into the winter dark. "Where is he now?" "With his dad and mom in the den. Watching football like nothing happened. Janet keeps saying I need to learn to manage a home right. They're all downstairs and I'm hiding up here like a kid." Her laugh was bitter, nothing like the giggle she used to have when I pushed her on the swings. "Abby, do you want me to come out there for Christmas?" I asked, heart thudding. She sniffled. "I wish you could, Dad. But I know you have work." I almost said yes, but my mind snapped back to reality. My contracting job in Cedar Rapids, bills to pay, retirement never stretching as far as you think. "I'll call after the holidays, sweetheart. Maybe you and Ethan could come home for New Year's?" The line went cold. "Sure, Dad. Gotta go." I sat there a long while after she hung up, the old house settling around me. I should have driven straight out there, contract be damned. But pride and fear and money, they keep old men glued to the couch when they should be storming the gates. Abby had only been married a year. The whole thing had been a rush. I remember her showing up last spring, blue eyes shining, flashing a ring bigger than her fist. "Dad, I'm engaged. His name's Ethan Carter. He's a project manager. He's so good to me." Even then, I'd seen the way she twisted that ring, glancing at her phone, answering his texts between sentences. "He makes all the decisions so I don't have to worry," she'd said. That should have set off every alarm in my head. Linda, God rest her, would have never stood for it. I remember their wedding. March, chilly Iowa wind snapping the tent flaps outside a rented golf club in Westfield. Abby wore her grandma's dress, let her hair down in loose curls like she did when she was little. But most of the guests were Ethan's family. His mom, Janet, organized every detail. His dad, Thomas, made jokes at the reception about how wives should keep their men happy, not the other way around. I sat there in my one good suit, watching my girl shrink into herself as Janet critiqued the flowers and Ethan told her to smile for the camera, not like that, the nice smile. Abby stopped calling home as often. Holidays became awkward. Last Thanksgiving, she called to say Ethan couldn't make it, big project at work. Over the months, her hobbies faded. Her book club, her runs at the park, she didn't have time. I told myself it was just marriage. But I saw her slipping away, and I told myself she'd call if she needed me. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, feeling every ache in my old bones. The wind rattled the windows, and for the first time since Linda passed, I felt truly alone. Why hadn't I pressed harder? Why did I let her walk into a life that seemed more like a cage every time she called? Morning came gray and bitter cold. I drank coffee at the kitchen table, looking at Linda's picture, her smile fierce, her eyes unafraid. That's the woman Abby needed now, not me hiding behind work and excuses. The phone rang, Abby's number again. But it wasn't her. It was Ethan's voice, clipped and cold, asking if I was coming out for Christmas. He'd forgotten to check if Abby's dad had plans. I said no, work, maybe next year. He didn't sound disappointed. As I hung up, I stared at the calendar. My contract meeting had just been pushed. Suddenly, I had nothing but time and a restless, burning need to see my daughter. Maybe Christmas wasn't too late to show up after all. Maybe it was the only time left. I didn't waste another minute. By noon, I was at the Pine Grove Mall, hunting for the right gifts. Something practical and warm, something to remind Abby she still belonged somewhere safe. The place was crowded with last-minute shoppers. I found a deep red wool scarf and a soft pair of gloves. The young cashier asked, "Shopping for someone special?" I nodded. "My daughter. She gets cold easy, just like her mom did." The girl smiled. "She's lucky to have you." I wrapped the gifts in blue paper with silver bows. Abby always loved that color as a kid. Next, I picked up a book for her, something about strong women who built their own destinies. I wanted her to remember who she was before all this started, before Ethan, before Westfield, before her world got so small. Early Christmas morning, I packed up my old Chevy, set the coffee maker for 5 a.m., and slid the wrapped presents onto the passenger seat. The roads were still dark when I left, headlights cutting through Iowa's endless fields and sleeping farmhouses. I drove through towns with names like Boone and Winterset, the kind of places where everyone waves whether they know you or not. The sun was barely up by the time I crossed into Illinois, snow starting to fall in soft, heavy flakes. On the radio, Nat King Cole sang about chestnuts roasting on an open fire. It made me think of Linda, her laughter ringing out as she burned cookies every Christmas Eve, the smoke alarm always joining the carols. My heart ached for those simpler days. About noon, I finally reached Westfield. The Carter family's house was set back from the road, big and new, with Christmas lights twinkling across the porch. Ethan's black SUV was parked out front, alongside his dad's Cadillac. I parked across the street, hands suddenly shaking. What would I say if they opened the door? What would Abby think seeing her old man show up unannounced? I took a deep breath, grabbed the presents, and headed up the walkway. Before I could ring the bell, I saw her, a figure huddled on the porch swing, knees hugged to her chest, shivering in thin pajamas. For one awful second, I didn't recognize her. Her hair was tangled, face pale, lips nearly blue. Abby. Abigail! I dropped everything and ran to her. She stared up at me dazed. Dad? Why are you here? I wrapped my coat around her shoulders, feeling how cold she was, like holding a handful of snow. Never mind that, honey. Let's get you inside. But the door was locked. I banged hard. After a long minute, Ethan opened up, looking surprised. Mr. Walker, what are you doing here? He blocked the entry, glancing over his shoulder as if afraid his parents would see me. I'm here for Abby. Why is she out here freezing? He started to stammer about an accident, with coffee and his mom's favorite rug. She needed a minute to cool off, that's all, Janet said. I didn't let him finish. That's my daughter out there, and if you ever lock her out again, I swear I'll show you what it means to really cool off. Ethan stepped aside, face red. I guided Abby inside, straight to the living room. The Carters were gathered around the fireplace, opening presents, laughter dying as I entered. Janet, her lips tight, started in immediately. Really, Abigail, you're being dramatic. You ruined a priceless family heirloom. We were simply teaching you responsibility. I turned to Abby. Go get dressed, honey. We're leaving. You don't need to spend one more second with people who value a rug over your life. She hesitated, glancing at Ethan, at Janet, at Thomas, his arms crossed, expression stone cold. But then she nodded and hurried upstairs. Janet's voice rose, shrill with indignation. You can't just barge in and take her away. This is our home, and she's Ethan's wife now. I fixed her with a stare that could cut granite. No, ma'am. This is a prison. And my girl is coming home with me. While Abby packed, I waited in the kitchen. trying to keep my temper in check. Ethan followed, muttering apologies, but not for what he'd done. Only for being caught. Abby just gets worked up sometimes, he said. She overreacts. She'll be fine once she calms down. I stared at him. Let me tell you something, son. When a man loves a woman, he doesn't teach her lessons by locking her in the cold. He teaches her by loving her better. He said nothing. A few minutes later, Abby came downstairs with a small duffel bag, just the essentials. I took her hand, squeezed it. Ready? She nodded. Her eyes were shining, and for the first time in months, I saw a flicker of the old Abby. The one who used to beat me at Scrabble and outfish me at the lake. We walked out together, leaving the Carters gaping in the doorway, Christmas morning forgotten, their perfect holiday shattered by a father's love. As we drove away, the town's Christmas lights blurred in the rearview mirror, and Abby reached for my hand. Thank you, Dad, for not giving up on me. I squeezed her fingers, fighting the sting in my eyes. Never, kiddo. Not ever. We didn't talk much the first hour out of Westfield. I kept glancing at Abby, half afraid she'd vanish like a snowflake melting on my old truck's seat. She stared out the window at the gray fields and empty barns, her hands working nervously at the fringes of my scarf. I turned up the heater, hoping the warmth would work its way back into her bones. Finally, after we'd crossed the county line, Abby spoke. I'm sorry, Dad. I didn't mean to ruin your Christmas. I shook my head, eyes on the icy road. The only thing that could ruin Christmas is losing you, Abby. None of the rest of it matters. She tried to smile, but tears slipped down her cheeks instead. I kept thinking if I was just better, if I was more careful, more useful, maybe they'd treat me different. Maybe Ethan would love me again. I wanted to pull over and hug her, but the roads were slick, and I knew my arms weren't enough to fix this kind of hurt. You know, your mom used to burn the Christmas ham every single year, I said, forcing a little laughter. House smelled like smoke for a week, and we still called it the best meal we'd ever had. She always said, it's not Christmas until I set off the smoke alarm. Abby finally let out a real laugh, a sound I hadn't heard in a long time. I miss her so much, Dad. Me too, sweetheart. Every day. We stopped for gas outside a town called Manson. I went in for coffee, came back to find Abby curled up, sound asleep, my old coat wrapped around her shoulders. For the first time since I'd arrived that morning, she looked peaceful. I drove slow, letting her rest, the radio humming soft country songs as Iowa rolled by. We got home just after sunset. My old house looked small and plain after the Carters' suburban palace, but the lights in the window were warm and welcoming. I helped Abby carry her bag inside, the smell of pine and cinnamon still lingering from the little fake tree I'd put up in the living room. Abby wandered through the house like a ghost, touching old photos, running her hands along the edges of her childhood bookshelf. It hasn't changed a bit, she whispered. I never saw the point, I said. You always had the best taste. I set out the presents on the coffee table, poured us both hot chocolate, and put on one of Linda's old holiday records. Abby sat cross-legged on the couch, clutching the scarf I'd bought her. I can't believe I let it go this far, she said quietly. I used to think I was strong. I was going to have a career, make a difference, you know? I took a long sip of cocoa, searching for the right words. Sometimes the strongest people are the ones who know when to ask for help, or when to leave behind what's hurting them. Abby stared into her mug. Ethan kept telling me I wasn't enough. His family, they'd always point out the things I did wrong. I thought maybe I deserved it. I put a hand on her shoulder. No one deserves to be treated like that. Especially not my Abby. You got a right to be loved for who you are, not for how well you clean rugs or make breakfast. She squeezed my hand, eyes shining with tears and something brighter. Thanks, Dad. For coming for me. For not letting me freeze out there, literally and figuratively. We spent that night in front of the fire, talking about everything but Westfield. I told her stories about her mom, the time Linda tried to fix the old washing machine with duct tape and a prayer, the night she convinced the entire church choir to sing in our living room because she thought the acoustics were better. Abby laughed so hard she nearly choked on her cocoa. At some point, she fell asleep on the couch, wrapped in her new scarf, a soft smile on her lips. I tucked a blanket over her and sat in the armchair, watching the snow pile up against the window. My heart felt lighter than it had in years. But as the hours passed, I started to worry. Ethan was stubborn, his parents even more so. What if they tried to force her back? What if they called the police or made trouble at my work? I stared into the darkness, the old fears creeping back. Had I done enough? Had I waited too long? I looked at Abby, safe at last in her childhood home, and made myself a promise. Whatever it took, I'd make sure she never had to go back to that place. I'd stand in front of every storm, fight every battle, no matter how old and tired I got. Outside the wind howled, but inside, the fire glowed steady, and I knew, for tonight, at least, my daughter was home, and she was safe. The next morning, I woke to the smell of fresh coffee and the sound of Abby humming in the kitchen. For a moment, it was like old times, a quiet December morning, snow dusting the backyard, the house full of warmth and promise. I found her standing by the window, mug in hand, watching a pair of cardinals flit through the branches. "Didn't think I'd see you up this early," I said, smiling. She shrugged, pulling my old flannel shirt tighter around her. "Didn't sleep much? Too many thoughts bouncing around. But the coffee helps." We sat together at the kitchen table, the same table Linda and I had bought second-hand our first year of marriage. Abby traced the worn wood with her fingertip, lost in thought. "Dad, what am I supposed to do now?" she asked quietly. "I don't have a job. I don't have any money of my own. Everything in Westfield was tied to Ethan, my accounts, my phone plan, even my car." I reached across and squeezed her hand. "One step at a time, honey. First things first, we get you your own bank account and a new phone. We'll talk to some folks down at the community center. Maybe there's something open in marketing, you always had a knack for that. And as for the car," I paused, thinking. "Well, my old truck runs just fine, and we'll figure out the rest." She gave a shaky smile. "It feels like I'm starting over. Like I've forgotten how to be an adult. We all start over sometimes, Abby. Your mom and I did more than once. You're stronger than you know." By midday, the snow had stopped and a weak sun shone through the clouds. I drove Abby into town, first to the credit union, then to the cell phone store. At each stop, she hesitated, double-checking forms, apologizing to the clerks, glancing at me for reassurance. I gave her space to make her own choices but stayed close, just in case she needed a hand to hold. In the grocery store, Abby reached for her favorite tea and paused. "Ethan always said herbal tea was a waste of money. He'd only let me buy the cheap black bags. Good thing you're not shopping for Ethan anymore," I said. "Put it in the cart. And get yourself some of those lemon cookies you like, too." She smiled, the first real, unguarded smile I'd seen since she'd come home. "Thanks, Dad." After lunch, we sat together at the kitchen table, sorting through paperwork, old resumes, copies of her degree, a few leftover business cards from her last job. I watched her straighten the pile, taking comfort in the order she created. "What if Ethan calls?" she asked softly, not looking up. "Or shows up? Or what if he tries to take me back?" I took a deep breath. "He can try, but he won't get far. You're not a piece of property, Abby. You don't owe that man, or his family, another minute of your life. If he calls, you don't have to answer. If he shows up, I'll be right here. And if he makes trouble, we'll call the sheriff. That's what the law's for." She nodded, relief mixing with old fear. He always made me feel like I was the problem. Like I had to apologize for everything, even when I didn't do anything wrong. I shook my head. That's not love, kiddo. That's control. Don't you ever forget the difference. The days passed slow and steady. Abby started helping out around the house, cooking dinners, shoveling the walk, even tackling the old flower beds Linda used to love. Each little task seemed to give her back a piece of herself. One afternoon I came home from running errands and found her sitting at my desk, typing away on my computer. Working on something? I asked. She turned, a spark in her eyes. Updating my resume. And looking at jobs in the area. There's a marketing position at the hardware store. They need someone to run their social media and ads. I think I'm going to apply. That's my girl, I said, pride swelling in my chest. That night, we ate chili by the fire, laughing about old stories. Abby's disastrous attempt at baking cookies for her first grade bake sale, Linda's terrible singing voice, the time we'd gotten lost on the way to Lake Okoboji and ended up at a tractor museum. The tension in Abby's shoulders eased a little more each day. But just as we were starting to feel safe, the phone rang. I answered out of habit, not recognizing the number. On the other end, Ethan's voice was flat and cold. Mr. Walker, I need to speak to Abigail. Now. I covered the receiver. Do you want to talk to him? Abby shook her head, going pale. She doesn't want to talk, Ethan. And you have no right to call here. His tone sharpened. She's my wife. She belongs with me. You're interfering in our marriage. I bristled, but kept my voice steady. Abby is staying here as long as she wants. If you try anything, you'll be dealing with me and the law. For a moment, all I heard was heavy breathing on the other end. Then, quietly, you'll regret this. So will she. The line went dead. I hung up, my heart pounding. Abby was trembling, eyes wide with fear. I won't let him hurt you, I promised, pulling her into a hug. Not ever again. That night, I double-checked the locks and kept the porch light burning. There was still a long road ahead, but Abby wasn't walking it alone, not anymore. The threats on the phone stuck with me. After years of railroad work, I knew when trouble was coming down the track. That night, I barely slept. Every creak of the house, every gust of wind set my nerves on edge. I sat in my old recliner, boots on, just in case. Abby tried to put on a brave face the next morning. She made pancakes, her mom's recipe, a little too much vanilla, just the way I liked. But her hands shook as she poured the batter. Do you really think he'll come, Dad? She whispered. I set down my coffee. I don't know, honey. But if he does, we'll handle it together. You're not alone anymore. Not in my house. After breakfast, I made a call to the county sheriff's office. Sheriff Matthews had gone to school with Linda, and he listened quietly while I explained the situation. Sounds like classic intimidation, he said. If your son-in-law comes around, call us right away. And keep a record of every call, every message. You did the right thing getting her out of there. It helped, knowing the law was on our side, but I knew from experience that abusers rarely follow rules. So I did what I always do when I'm worried. I made a plan. I showed Abby how to lock the doors, where the spare keys were, and how to call the sheriff if she felt threatened. We practiced what she'd say if Ethan or his parents tried to show up at her new job or call her at the house. Still, Abby jumped every time the phone rang. Her first job interview was set for Friday at the hardware store. I offered to drive her, but she said she wanted to go alone, wanted to prove to herself that she could. She left in my old Chevy, chin up, hair pulled back, a new strength in her step. I watched her drive away, heart swelling with pride and worry in equal measure. The hours crawled by. I kept busy cleaning out the garage, shoveling the walk, repairing a loose gutter on the porch. Anything to keep my mind from racing. When Abby came home, her cheeks were flushed with cold and excitement. I think it went well, Dad. They asked a lot about social media, and I told them about the campaigns I ran at my last job. They said they'd call by Monday. I grinned. No one in this town has a better shot. I'm proud of you, kiddo. That night, I cooked chili and Abby insisted on making cornbread, burn the edges, just like her mom used to. We ate by the fire, trading stories, laughter pushing back the shadows. It was starting to feel like home again. But peace didn't last. Saturday morning, just as I was finishing my second cup of coffee, a silver SUV rolled up the drive. I recognized Ethan's license plate. My heart hammered, but I kept my face calm as I stepped out onto the porch. Ethan climbed out, dressed in a crisp suit, looking more like a banker than the small-town boy he used to be. He tried a smile. "Mr. Walker, I just want to talk to Abby. Alone." I crossed my arms, blocking the doorway. "She doesn't want to see you, Ethan. You're not welcome here." His expression hardened. "I came to take my wife home. She's making a scene. You're filling her head with nonsense. She belongs with her husband." I shook my head. "She belongs somewhere she's safe and loved. That's not your house." He tried to push past me, but I stood firm. "Step off my porch, Ethan. If you want to talk, it'll be in front of me, the neighbors, and anyone else who wants to watch." Abby appeared at the window, pale but steady. She opened the front door just enough to be heard. "I'm not coming back, Ethan. I want you to leave. If you try to contact me again, I'll get a restraining order." Ethan's face twisted with anger. "You're making a mistake, Abigail. You're nothing without me." I stepped between them. "She's more herself now than she ever was with you. Get in your car and go. Don't come back." He glared at both of us, but the neighbors were already peeking from behind curtains, and I could see the sheriff's cruiser pulling up at the corner, Sheriff Matthews giving Ethan a long, hard stare. Without another word, Ethan turned on his heel, got in his SUV, and tore down the street, tires spitting gravel. Abby sagged against the doorframe. "I was so scared," she whispered. "But I did it, Dad. I finally said it out loud." I hugged her tight. "You did, honey. And I'm right here with you, every step." The sheriff stopped by to check on us, made sure Ethan had left town, and promised to keep an eye on our street for the next few days. For the first time since Christmas, I felt like maybe, just maybe, the worst was behind us. That night, I sat by the window as Abby dozed on the couch, watching the moon rise over the snowy yard. My heart was still wary, but hope flickered, small and stubborn, deep in my chest. We were learning how to live again, one day at a time. Monday morning came with new hope. Abby was up before sunrise, her resume and references neatly stacked in a folder, hair combed, wearing the blue blouse Linda had bought her for college graduation. The phone rang just after breakfast. I watched as Abby answered, her voice uncertain but growing stronger with each word. "Yes, this is Abigail Walker. Yes, I'm still interested. Oh, thank you. Yes, I can start tomorrow." She hung up and turned to me, eyes wide. "Dad, I got the job. The hardware store, marketing and customer outreach. It's not much, but it's everything," I told her, hugging her tight. "It's a fresh start. I'm proud of you, Abby." We spent the rest of the morning getting her set up for her first day, packing a lunch, picking out a notebook, making a thermos of coffee. She left with a new bounce in her step, waving as she pulled out of the driveway in my old truck. I watched her go, feeling both the ache of letting go and the thrill of watching her take control of her life again. I tried to keep busy that day, organized the garage, fixed the old screen door, cleaned the attic. But every time a car passed by, my heart skipped. I was still waiting for the other shoe to drop. Abby came home that evening, cheeks pink from the cold, her eyes sparkling. "Dad, you wouldn't believe it. They want me to start a newsletter, help design new flyers, And I even taught the owner how to use Instagram. They said they haven't had this much energy in years. We celebrated with her favorite pizza, pepperoni and black olives, watching old home movies after dinner. Abby laughed at her childhood self, spinning in the backyard sprinkler, missing her 2 front teeth, singing off-key to her mom's favorite country song. But the relief was short-lived. Later that night, as Abby showered upstairs, I heard footsteps on the porch. My gut tightened. I turned off the TV and grabbed the old baseball bat from behind the door. A shadow moved past the frosted glass, then a hard knock. Sheriff Matthews' voice came through the door. "Evening, Joe. Can I come in?" I let him in, the cold air swirling around his boots. "Everything all right, Sheriff?" He sighed, rubbing his jaw. "Ethan Carter's been calling around, trying to get local folks to talk, asking about Abby, about you. Nothing illegal, but enough to make people uncomfortable. Some of the neighbors called it in." My stomach nodded. "Is he here? In town?" Matthews shook his head. "Not as far as we know. But folks are watching. You're not alone, Joe. And you've got half the county looking out for Abby." Abby came down, towel wrapped around her shoulders, hair wet. "Sheriff Matthews?" Her voice was small but steady. He smiled kindly. "Just wanted you to know you're safe here. You've got a lot of people rooting for you, Abigail. If Ethan contacts you directly, let us know. We can help with paperwork if you want a restraining order." Abby nodded. "Thank you, Sheriff. I think I will." After Matthews left, Abby sat on the couch, knees pulled to her chest. "I thought it would be over, Dad. I thought leaving would make it stop." I sat beside her. "Sometimes the hardest part is after you walk away. But you're not alone, Abby. We'll take it one day at a time." We filed the paperwork for a restraining order the next morning. The courthouse was busy, the halls echoing with winter boots and the sound of shuffling papers. Abby answered the clerk's questions calmly, her hands only trembling a little as she signed her name. Afterward, we stopped for coffee at a small cafe. Abby stared out the window at Main Street, people rushing by with armfuls of groceries and late Christmas returns. "Do you ever wish Mom was still here?" she asked softly. I swallowed the ache in my throat. "Every single day. She'd be so proud of you, Abby. She'd tell you that starting over isn't a sign of weakness. It's proof of how strong you really are." Abby smiled, wiping away a tear. "I want to believe that. Believe it. You're my girl." The rest of the week passed in a blur. Abby settled into her new job, came home every night with stories about customers and quirky coworkers, the old spark back in her eyes. I watched her laugh, watched her grow, and thanked God every night for another day of her safe at home. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sun dip behind the oaks, Abby turned to me. "I don't know what comes next, Dad. But for the first time in a long time, I'm not afraid to find out." I squeezed her hand, proud and grateful and a little bit in awe. "Whatever comes next, you won't face it alone. Not as long as I'm here." The stars came out over the snowy fields, and for the first time in a long time, I felt peace settle over our little house, a peace we'd fought for and finally begun to earn. Winter melted slowly into early spring. The days stretched a little longer, sunlight warming the patches of grass near the porch. Abby thrived at her new job, bringing home stories about cranky contractors and grateful customers, laughing about her bosses, dad jokes, and proud of every little success. The town rallied around her. At the grocery store, folks would stop to say hello, offering words of encouragement. At church, people asked how she was doing, quietly dropping notes of support into her coat pocket. The kindness made both of us realize just how much community matters. One Sunday after church, Sheriff Matthews found us in the parking lot. "Restraining orders in effect, Abby. Ethan's been served. If he so much as drives down your street, we'll know." Abby nodded, a weight lifting from her shoulders. Thank you, Sheriff. Really. Home became a place of healing. Abby started making plans, signed up for a painting class at the community center, joined a book club, and even started jogging in the mornings like she used to in college. Her laughter came easier, her step lighter. For the first time in ages, she was living for herself, not for someone else's expectations. We'd sit on the porch most evenings, watching the sunset burn across the fields. I'd tell her stories about Linda, how she never let anyone walk all over her, how she believed in speaking your mind, and how she always found beauty in the ordinary. You got that same fire in you, kiddo, I'd say. Abby would smile, leaning her head on my shoulder like she used to when she was small. Ethan never came back. There were a few more texts, angry, desperate, but Abby didn't respond. She showed them to Sheriff Matthews, who assured her that one wrong move and Ethan would be facing real consequences. Bit by bit, the shadow of her old life faded. As April rolled in, Abby received a letter. She'd been offered a promotion, just 3 months into the job. The owner wanted her to manage a new outreach program, working with local schools and small businesses. Dad, they trust me. They believe in what I can do. I beamed with pride. Told you were born for this. Your mom would have thrown a parade. To celebrate, we invited our neighbors over for Sunday dinner: roast chicken, mashed potatoes, Linda's secret apple pie recipe. Abby buzzed around the kitchen, music playing, face flushed with happiness. That night, as dishes dried and laughter echoed through the house, I realized just how much we'd come through. Before bed, Abby stood in the doorway to her childhood room. Thank you, Dad, for everything. I don't think I'd be here if you hadn't shown up that morning. I swallowed past the lump in my throat. That's what fathers do, honey. We show up, even if it takes us a little too long to get it right. Spring turned the world green again. Abby kept growing stronger, day by day. She started talking about moving into her own place, maybe just across town, so she could still come by for Sunday dinners. She'd come so far. Every time she smiled, every time she laughed or made a plan, I knew Linda would be proud. On Abby's birthday in May, she invited her coworkers and new friends over for a barbecue in the backyard. She wore a blue dress, hair pulled back, confidence shining from her like sunlight. After cake, she hugged me tight. I love you, Dad. I'm finally happy. I'm finally me again. I looked around at our home, full of life and laughter, and felt a quiet, overwhelming peace. The pain of the past hadn't disappeared, but we'd built something stronger, brick by brick, day by day. No matter what storms life threw at us, I knew we could face them together. Abby had found her way home, not just to my house, but to herself. And as her father, there was nothing in this world I could have wished for more.